Admiral Concincaid frowned, her eyes narrowed at the display. The alien battleship, if that ostentatious glass ornament could even be called that, hovered in space before the fleet, its crystalline structure gleaming with what was clearly intended as intimidating bioluminescence. Lieutenant Commander Nikolai Petrov scoffed beside her. "What's that old Earth saying? All flash, no substance." "That's Texas specifically, but yeah, point taken," Concincaid responded, leaning back in her command chair and crossing her arms. "They've been broadcasting the same message for the last hour. Behold the might of the Xrixian Empire and all that nonsense. I'm starting to think they expect us to surrender just from looking at their pretty light show." The bridge of the UES Thermopylae buzzed with activity, but there was no tension in the air. The crew of Earth's flagship, like its commander, seemed more irritated than concerned by the alien fleet that had appeared at the edge of Sol's heliosphere 3 days ago. Petrov brought up the technical specifications their sensors had gathered. Their primary weapon appears to be some form of directed energy beam, sophisticated but nothing our shields can't manage. And their hull? He paused, his brow furrowing. "Ma'am, according to these readings, their hull is actually crystalline, like literal space crystal. You're telling me these idiots built warships out of glorified glass?" Concincaid couldn't mask the disbelief in her voice. "Advanced crystalline composite," Petro corrected, though his tone suggested he found it equally absurd. "Apparently it's supposed to be some kind of living material that can self-repair." Concincaid scoffed. "Great. So instead of proper armor, they've got the space equivalent of a healing crystal. Fantastic." Communications Officer Devin Walsh cleared his throat. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the Xrixian flagship. They're requesting permission to board for diplomatic talks." "Oh, are they now?" Concincaid straightened in her chair. "Put them through." The main view screen flickered to life, displaying what humans had collectively decided looked like a cross between a giant mantis and a jellyfish. The Xrixian diplomat's translucent appendages waved in what was probably meant to be a regal manner. "Greetings, primitive species of Sol 3, the alien's translator intoned. "The glorious Xrixian Empire has deemed your solar system worthy of our attention. We offer you the unprecedented honor of peaceful integration into our collective. You may present your surrender at your convenience." Concincaid blinked slowly, deliberately. "Let me get this straight. You park your fancy disco balls at the edge of our system, wave your tentacles around, and expect us to just roll over." The Xrixian diplomat's appendages stiffened. "Perhaps you misunderstand. The Xrixian armada has never been defeated in battle. The magnificence of our battle cruisers alone has caused 17 species to surrender without a single shot fired." "Uh-huh," Concincaid nodded. "And did any of those 17 species have FTL capabilities?" A pause. "Well, no, but—" "Nuclear fusion?" "Not exactly." "Antimatter weaponry?" The alien's appendages were now vibrating with what might have been indignation. "Your technological advancement is irrelevant. The Xrixian Empire spans 12 star systems." Petrov leaned toward Concincaid and whispered, "That's cute. Should we tell them the Terran Alliance has colonized 27? Concincaid waved him off, but couldn't suppress her smirk. "Tell you what, Ambassador, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name." "Supreme Diplomatic Envoy First Light through Morning Dew," the alien replied stiffly. "Right, Dew. Here's what we'll do. You're so confident in your magnificence? Fine, I propose an exchange. You send a delegation to tour our flagship and we'll send one to yours. A little show and tell between potential friends." The alien's bioluminescence flickered in what intelligence briefings suggested was their equivalent of a thoughtful expression. "This is unusual but acceptable. The glory of Xrixian engineering will surely humble your primitive minds." "Looking forward to it," Concincaid said dryly. "We'll prepare a shuttle to receive your delegation in 2 hours." After the transmission ended, Walsh turned to her with raised eyebrows. "Are you sure about this, Admiral? Inviting them aboard?" Concincaid grinned. It wasn't a particularly nice grin. "Oh, absolutely. In fact, I want engineering to give our guests the full tour. especially the weapon systems and the engine room. Ma'am? Petrov looked confused. Lieutenant Commander, have you ever seen a peacock strut its stuff? Of course. And have you ever seen what happens when you put that peacock next to an actual predator? Understanding dawned on the officer's face, followed by a slow smile. We're going to scare the living daylights out of them, aren't we? Diplomatically, of course, Concincaid replied, standing up. I want the Thermopylae looking her absolute best. Spit and polish, people. Let's show these pompous jellyfish what a real warship looks like. First Light through Morning Dew had expected many things from the human vessel. Crude technology, barbaric design, perhaps even pathetic attempts to copy Xrixian aesthetics. What the diplomatic envoy had not expected was the sheer, terrifying brutality of human engineering. This is our main corridor, explained the human called Chief Engineer Okafor, a tall female with dark skin and a disconcertingly friendly smile. We're heading toward the central weapons control hub first. Dew's appendages trembled slightly as they glided along the metal hallway. Everything was angular, harsh, functional, nothing like the elegant flowing curves of Xrixian architecture. Most disturbing was the complete lack of decorative bioluminescence. How do they even navigate in such sterile surroundings? Your ship seems very solid, Dew remarked, trying to be diplomatic. Thermopylae's outer hull is 60 meters of layered titanium tungsten alloy, carbon nanotube mesh, and reactive armor, Okafor said cheerfully, as if describing a pleasant garden. She can take a direct hit from most known weapons and keep on fighting. One of Dew's junior diplomats' third ripple on Silent Lake trembled so violently that his translator glitched. 60 meters, but how does it move? The human laughed. Oh, the hull's just the beginning. Wait until you see the engines. The Xrixian delegation exchanged nervous glances as they were led into a cavernous room filled with screens, control stations, and humans in various uniforms tapping away at interfaces. Welcome to weapons control, announced another human, this one with facial hair and a red uniform. I'm Commander Xiao, Tactical Officer. This is where we coordinate all offensive and defensive systems aboard the Thermopylae. Dew floated forward cautiously. I notice your control systems are remarkably manual. Xiao nodded. Absolutely. We found that while AI assistance is valuable, having human operators make the final decisions gives us a tactical flexibility that fully automated systems lack. But surely such primitive interface methods slow your response time, Dew couldn't help but ask. Not at all. Here, let me demonstrate. Xiao turned to a young human at a nearby station. Annan, run simulation Delta 9. Aye, sir, Annan replied, fingers dancing across her control panel. The main screen lit up with a tactical display showing the Thermopylae surrounded by enemy vessels, vessels that looked unnervingly similar to the Xrixian battlecruisers. This is a standard defensive scenario, Xiao explained as the simulation played out. Multiple hostiles approaching from different vectors. Dew watched in growing horror as the simulated Thermopylae unleashed a barrage of weapons that could only be described as excessive. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and several weapons Dew couldn't even identify erupted from the human vessel, reducing the simulated attackers to space debris in seconds. Our reaction time from threat detection to full weapons deployment is approximately 2.3 seconds, Xiao said casually. We can sustain maximum offensive output for roughly 6 hours before needing to cool the systems or rearm. On Siley was now visibly shaking. And that's nice, much what added Okafor with an unnervingly bright smile. Would you like to see our strategic options? Perhaps we should continue the tour. Du suggested hastily. The next stop was even worse. The engine room of the human vessel was a nightmare of barely contained destructive potential. Massive cylinders glowed with ominous blue light, while technicians monitored readouts with the casual indifference of beings who had grown comfortable working next to apocalyptic forces. "These are our primary antimatter reactors," Okafor explained, patting one of the monstrous cylinders affectionately. "They provide the baseline power for life support, weapons, and sublight propulsion." "Antimatter," Du's translator stuttered. "You harness antimatter for routine power generation?" "Of course," Okafor looked surprised. "Don't you? It's the most efficient energy density you can get without resorting to micro-singularities, and those are still experimental." "Experimental," gasped Fourth Shadow over deep water, another junior diplomat who had been silent until now. "You experiment with black holes?" "Only tiny ones," Okafor assured them, which was not reassuring at all. "Now, if you'll follow me, I'll show you our FTL drive. We use a modified Alcubierre warp field, but we've made some fascinating improvements to the original concept." By the time the tour reached the ship's foundry, an entire section dedicated to manufacturing replacement parts and ammunition during extended deployments, Du had seen enough. The humans didn't just build warships, they built self-sufficient engines of destruction that could operate independently for years if necessary. Most horrifying of all was the casual way the humans treated these technologies. They spoke of world-ending power sources as if discussing household appliances. They calibrated planet-killing weapons while making jokes. They had built their flagship not to impress or intimidate, but purely for practical, efficient violence. And Du had arrived with crystalline ships designed primarily to look impressive. Meanwhile, aboard the Xrixian flagship Crystal Dominance, Lieutenant Commander Petrov was trying very hard not to laugh. "And this," announced Grand Technical Overseer 7th Gleam in Winter Dark, "is our primary offensive system." Petrov stared at what appeared to be a giant focusing crystal suspended in the center of a chamber lined with mirrors. "It's very shiny. The refractor array harnesses the power of our sun gems to create a beam of concentrated light energy," the alien explained proudly. "When fully charged, it can deliver a thermal impact equivalent to your primitive nuclear devices." "Fascinating," Petrov murmured, making notes on his tablet. "And how long does it take to charge between firing sequences?" "Merely 7 of your Earth minutes," the alien boasted. "No other species in known space has achieved such rapid redeployment." Petrov thought about the Thermopylae's main railguns, which could fire continuously at a rate of 6 rounds per minute, each with a kinetic energy roughly equivalent to a small nuclear detonation. He thought about the ship's point defense lasers that could track and destroy incoming projectiles in milliseconds. He thought about mentioning any of this, then decided against it. "Very impressive," he said instead. "May I ask about your defensive systems?" The tour continued through the alien vessel, which Petrov had to admit was aesthetically beautiful. The entire ship seemed to be grown rather than built, with flowing organic lines and surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Crew members, all variations on the mantis jellyfish theme, floated gracefully through corridors that seemed designed more for ceremony than functionality. What the ship lacked, Petrov noted with growing amazement, was anything resembling serious armor, redundant systems, or sustainable combat capability. The Xrixians had clearly evolved in an environment with minimal predation and had approached space exploration with the same lack of survival instinct. "Our living hull can repair most damage within hours," 7th Gleam explained as they passed a section where the crystalline material seemed to be growing before their eyes. "We have never needed crude metal barriers when our ships can heal themselves." "Remarkable," Petrov said, genuinely impressed by the biotechnology, if not the strategic thinking behind it. "But what happens if the damage is extensive, or if key systems are targeted?" The alien's appendages waved in what might have been dismissal. "No species has ever penetrated our outer crystal layer. The beauty of our vessels causes most primitives to surrender rather than risk damaging such perfection." "I see," Petrov said carefully. He decided not to mention that the standard procedure for human naval engagements was to target enemy weapons, propulsion, and command systems, usually simultaneously with overwhelming force. Beauty wouldn't enter into the calculation at all. The final stop on the tour was the Xrixian Command Center, a spectacular chamber dominated by a floating three-dimensional display of the surrounding space. Here, High Commander First Storm over Ancient Ocean greeted the human delegation with formal courtesy. "What do you think of our magnificent vessel, humans?" the commander asked, appendages arranged in what intelligence suggested was a posture of pride. "Does it not inspire awe in your primitive hearts?" Petrov chose his words with diplomatic care. "It is certainly unlike anything in the human fleet, High Commander. The biotechnology alone is worth further study." "Indeed," the alien's translator conveyed smugness. "Perhaps now you understand why resistance would be futile. Our 12 battlecruisers could reduce your homeworld to ash if we so desired." Petrov smiled blandly. "I appreciate the tour, High Commander. I look forward to continuing our diplomatic discussions." As the human delegation prepared to return to their shuttle, Petrov overheard two Xrixian officers communicating, their translators inactive. His universal translator, considerably more advanced than the diplomatic version the Xrixians were using, picked up the conversation effortlessly. "The humans seem unimpressed," one officer was saying. "Perhaps their species lacks the sensory capacity to appreciate true beauty." "Or perhaps," the other replied, "they are simply too primitive to understand the power they face. Their metal vessel is crude and inelegant, clearly inferior." Petrov smiled to himself. Oh, they were in for such a surprise. When both delegations had returned to their respective vessels, Admiral Concincaid called a briefing in the Thermopylae war room. "Report, Lieutenant Commander," she said as Petrov took his seat. "Well," Petrov began, bringing up his notes on the central display, "their ships are exactly what they appear to be, glorified art projects. The crystalline material does have impressive self-repair capabilities, but it's structurally about as robust as high-grade glass. One good hit from our main guns would shatter it." "Weapons," Concincaid prompted. "A single directed energy weapon that takes 7 minutes to recharge between shots. No missile systems, no kinetic weapons, minimal point defense. They're basically one-shot wonders, and not particularly wonderful shots at that." "Propulsion?" "Some kind of bioelectric pulse drive, efficient for its type, but nothing close to our capabilities. They have FTL, but it's slow, maybe 20 light-years per standard week at maximum output." Concincaid leaned back in her chair, her expression balanced between amusement and concern. "So they're completely outmatched, but don't know it." "That's my assessment," Petrov confirmed. "Their entire strategy seems to be based on looking intimidating enough that no one actually fights them." "And how did they react to our ship?" Chief Engineer Okafor grinned. "Their chief diplomat was practically leaving a slime trail of terror by the time we finished the tour. I showed them the antimatter reactors and mentioned the experimental micro-singularity research, and I think one of them actually fainted." "The weapons demonstration didn't help," Commander Shao added. "When I ran the combat simulation, the junior diplomat started vibrating so hard I thought he might phase through the deck plating." Laughter rippled around the table, but Concincaid held up a hand. "As entertaining as this is, we have a diplomatic situation to resolve. These Xrixians may be technologically outmatched, but they're clearly expansionist. If they're used to species surrendering at first sight, they might not know how to back down gracefully." "You think they might actually attack?" Walsh asked, sounding incredulous. "People, and aliens, do stupid things when their pride is wounded," Concincaid replied, "especially if they've never faced real consequences before." She turned to the diplomatic officer. "Commander Reyes, what's your assessment?" Commander Elena Reyes, who had been quietly analyzing the data from both delegations, looked up from her tablet. "Their social structure appears to be hierarchical and based largely on aesthetic achievement and perceived grandeur. Losing face would be catastrophic for the leadership. However, they also show signs of being highly practical when presented with overwhelming evidence. So if we can demonstrate our superiority without humiliating them publicly, they might back down? Concincaid asked. Precisely, Reyes nodded. They need a way to retreat that preserves their dignity. Concincaid drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. All right, here's what we're going to do. Walsh, open a channel to the Xrixian flagship. I want to speak with their commander. A few moments later, the familiar translucent form of High Commander First Storm over Ancient Ocean appeared on the main screen. Admiral Concincaid, the alien's translator intoned. Have you considered our generous offer of peaceful integration? I have indeed, High Commander, Concincaid replied smoothly. And I have a counter-proposal. It seems our species have much to learn from each other. Your biotechnology is quite remarkable, and perhaps there are aspects of human engineering that might interest you as well. The alien's appendages shifted in what the humans now recognized as thoughtful consideration. The Council of Illumination has authorized me to inform you that we are reevaluating our expansion policies. Perhaps there are benefits to collaboration that we had not previously considered. I'm glad to hear it, Concincaid said. What do you say to a demonstration, a friendly competition, if you will? Your finest battlecruiser against our flagship, not combat, she clarified quickly, but a series of challenges to compare capabilities, speed, maneuverability, defensive systems, purely for a mutual understanding. The alien commander's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. You wish to race, among other things? Concincaid nodded. Think of it as a cultural exchange through technology, much more civilized than threatening to reduce planets to ash, don't you think? There was a long pause as the alien seemed to consider this. Finally, it responded. This is acceptable. We will demonstrate the superiority of Xrixian engineering through peaceful means. When do you wish to begin this competition? Let's say 6 hours from now. That should give both sides time to prepare. We'll transmit suggested parameters for the demonstration shortly. After the transmission ended, Petrov looked at Concincaid with raised eyebrows. A space race, really? Trust me, Concincaid grinned. It's the perfect solution. They get to show off, we get to show off, and nobody has to die because some jellyfish gets their tentacles in a twist. And when we inevitably outperform them in every category, Reyes asked, then we gracefully acknowledge their strengths, express our interest in a cultural exchange, and propose that our species might find more benefit in a peaceful coexistence rather than integration. Do you believe they will simply accept that? Walsh inquired with skepticism. Concaid's expression turned serious. They had better, because Plan B is far less diplomatic. 6 hours later, the UES Thermopylae confronted the Xrixian battlecruiser Crystal Dominance in the void between Earth and Mars. The remaining ships of both fleets held their positions at a respectful distance, observing the proceedings through long-range sensors. This is absurd, Petro muttered while monitoring the tactical display. It's like pitting a Formula One race car against a horse-drawn carriage. A rather beautiful horse-drawn carriage, Concincaid corrected absently. Which is precisely the point. Ensure that our telemetry is transmitting clearly to their vessel. I want them to fully grasp how outmatched they are. The initial challenge was straightforward, acceleration from a standstill to maximum sublight speed, followed by a swift deceleration to 0. The Crystal Dominance took the lead, its bioluminescent hull pulsating as it gathered energy. It surged forward with surprising elegance, accelerating steadily until it reached what their sensors indicated was its maximum velocity, roughly 0.15 c. Not bad, Okafor remarked from the engineering station. For a biologically driven propulsion system, that's actually quite impressive. After the alien vessel had returned to its original position, it was the Thermopylae's turn. Concincaid nodded to the helm. Lieutenant Lee, demonstrate our capabilities. Full military power. Aye, Admiral. Full military power. The massive human warship, almost twice the size of its alien counterpart, appeared to leap forward as its antimatter engines engaged. Within seconds, it had surpassed the Xrixian vessel's top speed. 10 seconds later, it was approaching 0.4 c. After 20 seconds, the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate as the ship reached 0.6 c. That should suffice, Concincaid stated after 30 seconds of acceleration. Bring us to a complete stop, then return to the starting position. The Thermopylae's massive engines reverse thrust, shedding velocity with the same brutal efficiency with which they had gained it. In moments, the warship hung motionless in space once more, then smoothly returned to its initial position. Telemetry confirms the Xrixians received our performance data, Walsh reported, unable to conceal a hint of smugness in his voice. They are requesting a brief pause before the next challenge. Granted, Concincaid nodded. I imagine they require time to reassess their expectations. When communications resumed, the Xrixian commander's translators seemed to have developed a slight stutter. A truly remarkable display of raw power, Admiral. However, true excellence in spacefaring lies in precision and maneuverability, not merely brute force. I couldn't agree more, Concincaid replied amiably. Shall we proceed to the obstacle course? The obstacle course was a hastily constructed series of sensor buoys deployed between the two ships, creating a three-dimensional slalom designed to test each vessel's agility and the crew's reaction times. This time, the results were less dramatically one-sided. The Xrixian vessel, being smaller and designed with a certain fluid grace, performed admirably, weaving between the markers with elegant precision. When the Thermopylae's turn arrived, the human ship couldn't match the alien vessel's grace. However, what it lacked in elegance, it compensated for in control. Despite its massive size, the warship executed the course with textbook precision, its movements efficient and deliberate. Their bioships may possess an advantage in agility, Concincaid conceded after both ships had completed the course. This is worth noting for tactical considerations. The final test, the one Concincaid had been anticipating, was defensive capabilities. A series of harmless but measurable energy pulses would be directed at each ship to evaluate their defensive systems. The Crystal Dominance went first, its crystalline hull shimmering as the test pulses approached. The majority of the energy was deflected by what appeared to be a refractive shield, while the hull itself absorbed the remainder without any visible damage. Their defensive concept is not actually terrible, Zhao observed. The crystalline structure disperses energy rather than attempting to block it entirely against certain types of attacks that might be more efficient than our approach. But against kinetic weapons? Concincaid inquired. They'd shatter like holiday ornaments, Zhao confirmed. When it was the Thermopylae's turn, Concincaid decided to make a statement. Tactical, disable all active defenses. Let's absorb these hits on our hull alone. Admiral Xiao appeared startled. You heard me, Commander. Armor only for this demonstration. The test pulses, equivalent to light laser fire, struck the Thermopylae's massive armored hull and dissipated without effect. Not even a scorch mark appeared on the dark metal plating. Now activate standard defensive screens, Concincaid ordered. Full spectrum. The next volley of test pulses never reached the ship at all, splashing harmlessly against an invisible barrier several meters from the hull. And now, Concincaid said with a slight smile, let's demonstrate our point defense systems, Tactical Intercept Program Alpha. The final series of test pulses approached the Thermopylae only to be met by precisely calculated counter-pulses that neutralized them midway between the source and the ship. Transmission from the Xrixian flagship, Walsh announced. They're requesting another pause. Take all the time you require, Concincaid replied generously. In the command center of the Crystal Dominance, chaos reigned. Impossible, High Commander First Torm exclaimed, appendages lashing in agitation. Their metal construct cannot possibly contain such power. First Light Through Morning Dew, who had been unusually quiet since returning from the tour of the human vessel, finally spoke up. High Commander, with respect, what we have witnessed merely confirms what I observed aboard their ship. The humans approach space travel from a fundamentally different perspective than our own. Explain, the commander demanded. The Xrixian philosophy has always been one of harmony and elegance, Dew began carefully. Our ships are extensions of ourselves, beautiful, sophisticated, and designed to inspire awe rather than fear. This has served us well in our expansion, as most species recognize the cultural superiority our vessels represent. And your point is? The commander's translator conveyed impatience. The humans build their ships for war, Du stated bluntly, not merely as a possibility, but as the primary purpose. The vessel I toured was not designed to impress or intimidate. It was designed to survive and inflict maximum damage in the most efficient manner possible. And based on what we have just witnessed, they are exceptionally good at it. Silence fell across the command center as the implications sank in. The humans had not been exaggerating their capabilities during the tour. If anything, they had been understating them. "What do you propose, diplomatic envoy?" the commander asked finally. Du's appendages arranged themselves in the formal pattern indicating grave counsel. "I propose we reconsider our approach to this species. The humans do not appear hostile, merely extremely prepared for hostility. If we persist with demands for integration, I believe they will respond with overwhelming force. And unlike the 17 species we have previously encountered, they possess both the means and the will to resist. You suggest we retreat after announcing our intention to claim this system?" The commander's bioluminescence pulsed with alarm. The Council of Illumination would never accept such humiliation. Then perhaps Du suggested carefully, "We should consider a different form of relationship altogether, one that preserves our dignity while acknowledging reality." When communications resumed, Admiral Concincaid was surprised to see both the High Commander and the diplomatic envoy on screen. "Admiral," first light through morning dew began, "the glorious Xrixian Empire has reconsidered its position regarding your solar system." "Oh?" Concincaid raised an eyebrow. "Yes," the diplomat continued. "Upon further reflection, we believe that your species possesses certain technical capabilities that make you uniquely qualified for a more equitable arrangement than we initially proposed." "I'm listening," Concincaid said, keeping her expression neutral despite the victory she could sense approaching. "The Xrixian Empire would like to propose an alliance rather than integration," the alien announced. "A mutual exchange of knowledge and resources that would benefit both our civilizations. Our biological engineering combined with your mechanical expertise could lead to advancements neither of us could achieve alone." Concincaid allowed herself a small smile. "That's certainly a more interesting proposition than surrender. I believe my government would be open to discussing such an arrangement, provided certain conditions are met, such as—" The High Commander asked wearily, "First, recognition of Terran's sovereignty over all currently claimed systems. Second, establishment of clear borders and diplomatic protocols. Third, cultural and scientific exchange programs that benefit both sides equally." The two aliens conferred briefly before responding. "These terms are acceptable as a starting point for negotiations," the diplomat said finally. "Excellent," Concincaid nodded. "I'll inform Earth Central immediately. In the meantime, perhaps your fleet might be more comfortable taking up orbit around Jupiter rather than maintaining position at the edge of our system. We'd be happy to provide coordinates for a stable parking orbit, plenty of interesting moons to observe while we work out the details." The suggestion, effectively moving the alien fleet farther from Earth while framing it as hospitality, was not lost on the aliens, but they accepted graciously enough. "As a gesture of good faith, we accept your suggestion," the High Commander said. "The Xrixian fleet will relocate to observe your Jupiter while diplomatic channels are established." After the transmission ended, the bridge crew of the Thermopylae let out a collective breath. "Did we just turn a potential invasion into a research exchange program?" Petrov asked, sounding slightly dazed. "Diplomacy backed by overwhelming firepower?" Concincaid replied with a shrug. "Works every time." "So, what happens now?" Walsh asked. Concincaid leaned back in her command chair, watching as the alien fleet began to move away from Earth's orbital path. "Now, we teach some glass jellyfish how real warships are built, learn how to grow crystalline computers, and hope like hell they don't have any friends out there who are actually dangerous. And if they do," Petrov raised an eyebrow. Concaid's expression hardened momentarily. "Then we'll be ready for them too. That's what humanity does. We prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." And so far, it's kept us alive in a universe that's both more wonderful and more terrifying than we ever imagined. 3 months later, Admiral Concincaid stood in the observation lounge of Jupiter Station, watching as human engineers worked alongside Xrixian biotechnicians on what was being called the Hybrid Project, an experimental vessel combining Xrixian crystalline biotechnology with human military engineering. "It's going to be ugly as sin," commented Petrov, who had joined her at the viewport. "Half battleship, half jellyfish, but effective," Concincaid replied. "Their regenerative hull material coupled with our armor concept, self-healing battleships that can take a beating, that's worth sacrificing some aesthetics." "The Xrixians seem to be adapting well to the partnership," Petrov observed. "Better than I expected, honestly. Turns out they're pragmatists under all that pomp and bioluminescence." Concincaid said, "Once they got over the initial shock of finding someone who could actually fight back, they've been surprisingly reasonable." First light, through morning dew, floated into the observation lounge, the Xerxians' movements more confident in the human environment than they had been during first contact. "Admiral, Lieutenant Commander," the alien greeted them. "I bring news from the Council of Illumination. Good news or bad news?" Concincaid asked. "That depends on your perspective," Dew replied. Appendages arranging in what humans had learned was an expression of ironic amusement. "The Council has received communication from the Arcavian Collective, a species on the far side of Xerxian space that we have been encouraging to join our empire." "Let me guess," Concincaid said dryly. "They've suddenly become less receptive to your encouragement." Indeed, Dew's translator conveyed dry humor. "It seems news of our alliance with humans has spread. The Arcavians have requested direct communication with Terran representatives. They want to make sure we're real," Petrov surmised. "Precisely," Dew confirmed. "The concept of a species that could match Xerxian technology, let alone exceed it in some areas, has created quite a stir in local space. Several civilizations that were considering integration with our empire are now reconsidering their options." "Sorry about that," Concincaid said, not sounding sorry at all. "Do not be," Dew replied, surprising both humans. "My government has come to recognize that expansion through intimidation has limitations, particularly when one eventually encounters a species that cannot be intimidated." The aliens' appendages shifted in what the humans now recognized as thoughtful consideration. "The Council of Illumination has authorized me to inform you that we are reevaluating our expansion policies. Perhaps there are benefits to collaboration that we had not previously considered." "That's surprisingly mature of them," Concincaid remarked. "We have existed for 12,000 of your years," Dew replied with dignity. "We may be vain, but we are not stupid. Only the truly foolish fail to adapt when presented with new information." "Like the information that some species build warships that can actually fight instead of just looking pretty?" Petrov asked with a grin. "Precisely." Dew's bioluminescence pulsed in what humans had learned was laughter, though I maintain that your vessels are aesthetically deficient. "They're not meant to win beauty contests," Concincaid shrugged. "They're meant to win wars, a concept we are beginning to appreciate," Dew acknowledged. "Which brings me to the true purpose of my visit. The Council has received disturbing reports from the edge of known space. It seems another expansionist power has been detected moving toward both our territories." Concincaid straightened, her expression turning serious. "Hostile? Unknown, but they do not respond to communication attempts, and they have already absorbed 2 minor civilizations at the periphery of our sensor range." "Not big on diplomacy, then," Petrov noted grimly. "Indeed, the Council formally requests that a joint Xrixian-Terran task force be assembled to investigate this potential threat. Your military expertise, combined with our sensory capabilities, would make for an ideal reconnaissance mission." Concincaid and Petrov exchanged looks. "I'll need to consult with Earth Central," Concincaid said finally, "but I don't anticipate any objections. If there's a new player moving into the neighborhood, we definitely want to know about it sooner rather than later." "Excellent." Dew's appendages arranged in formal gratitude. "I shall inform the Council." "How soon might such a task force be ready?" "The Thermopylae can be prepared in 48 hours," Concincaid replied without hesitation. Assuming your vessels can match that timeline, the crystal dominance stands ready, Du confirmed. After the alien had departed, Petrov turned to Concincaid with raised eyebrows. You think this is legitimate or just an excuse to get a closer look at our combat operations? Probably both, Concincaid admitted, but it doesn't matter. If there is a threat out there, we need to know about it. And if the Xrixian are fishing for intelligence, she shrugged, let them see what they're going to see. It might make them think twice about ever reconsidering our alliance. So we're actually doing this? A joint mission with space jellyfish? Welcome to the future, Lieutenant Commander, Concincaid said with a wry smile. Turns out it's even weirder than the sci-fi vids promised. The Joint Task Force departed Jupiter orbit exactly 48 hours later, consisting of the UES Thermopylae, the Xrixian flagship Crystal Dominance, and 2 escort vessels from each fleet. Their destination, a star system at the edge of Xrixian space, where the most recent reports of the unknown entities had originated. In the Thermopylae's war room, Admiral Concincaid studied the intelligence provided by the Xrixians with a critical eye. These sensor readings are remarkably detailed for such long range, she commented to Du, who had temporarily transferred to the human vessel as liaison. The crystalline matrices of our ships are particularly sensitive to certain types of energy emissions, the alien explained. What your instruments might perceive as background radiation, ours can differentiate into distinct patterns. Useful, Concincaid acknowledged, but these readings are still too vague to form any real tactical assessment. We need to get closer, hence our current trajectory, Du agreed. At current speeds, we should reach the Lanthe system in approximately 72 of your hours. Commander Xiao, who had been analyzing the Xrixian data alongside human intelligence, spoke up. There's something odd about the movement patterns in these reports, these unknown ships. They're moving in perfect synchronization with no deviation, even when navigating complex gravitational fields. Automated, Petrov suggested. Possibly, Xiao nodded, or controlled by some kind of hive mind. Either way, it suggests a level of coordination beyond what we typically see even in highly disciplined fleet operations. Concincaid frowned. Du, has your empire encountered AI civilizations before? The alien's appendages stiffened slightly. There have been incidents. 3,000 years ago, a species known as the Vex created self-replicating machines that eventually turned on their creators. The Xrixian Empire was forced to quarantine an entire sector of space to contain the outbreak. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Concincaid asked sharply. The Vex incident was resolved millennia ago, Du replied defensively, and there is no evidence that these new entities are related. I merely mention it as a historical precedent for the type of coordination Commander Xiao described. Concincaid wasn't entirely satisfied with that explanation, but she let it drop for the moment. All right, for now we proceed as planned, but I want continuous updates on any changes to these movement patterns. If we're dealing with some kind of machine intelligence, our approach strategies will need to be completely different. A wise precaution, Du agreed. As the task force continued its journey toward the edge of charted space, the mood aboard the Thermopylae grew increasingly tense. Most of the crew had never operated this far from Terran space before, and the unknown nature of their potential adversary only added to the unease. In her private quarters, Concincaid recorded a personal log entry, a habit she had maintained throughout her naval career. Admiral's personal log, Day 3 of Joint Expedition. I can't shake the feeling that we're not getting the full story from our Xrixian allies. Their sudden willingness to collaborate, this convenient external threat, it all feels too neat. And yet the data they've provided appears genuine. If there is something out there absorbing entire civilizations, we need to know about it. Despite the Xrixians' hidden agenda, the crew is adapting well to the situation, although I've observed an increase in the use of the recreation facilities during off-duty hours, a typical reaction to stress. Lieutenant Commander Petrov has proven invaluable, acting as an informal go-between for our personnel and the Xrixian representatives. His ability to find common ground with these aliens continues to be impressive. Regarding Due, I'm still trying to understand him. For a diplomat, he's surprisingly open about Xrixian capabilities and limitations, which either indicates genuine trust or a more subtle form of deception than I give them credit for. I suppose only time will tell. We have 24 hours until we reach the Lanthe system. I've ordered battle stations drills every 6 hours from now until we arrive. Whatever awaits us, the Thermopylae will be ready. The Lanthe system came into sensor range precisely on schedule, a yellow dwarf star with 7 planets, the third of which, according to Xrixian records, had once supported a thriving pre-spaceflight civilization. No artificial emissions detected, the sensor officer reported as the task force dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. No communications, no power signatures, nothing to indicate technological activity. Concincaid inquired, "Life signs on Lanthe 3? Scanning revealed significant biomass, but the distribution patterns are abnormal, inconsistent with recorded historical settlement patterns." Dew floated forward, extending appendages towards the sensor displays. "May I?" The sensor officer looked to Concincaid, who nodded. The alien studied the readings, its bioluminescence dimming noticeably. "This is troubling," Dew stated. The Lanthe were bipedal mammals with distinct urban centers. These readings suggest complete environmental reorganization. The biomass is now distributed in a fungal pattern across the planet's surface. Concincaid suggested grimly, "Some kind of biological weapon?" Dew's appendages vibrated with what might have been distress. "Unknown, but I have transmitted the data to the Crystal Dominion for analysis. Our biological sciences are more advanced than your own." Concincaid said dryly, "No offense taken. In the meantime, I want a closer look at that planet. Helm, take us into high orbit around Lanthe 3. Tactical, maintain full defensive readiness." As the task force moved deeper into the system, the sense of unease grew stronger. The planets were in their expected positions. The star burned as expected, but there was an unsettling absence of the typical space debris one would expect in a natural system. No asteroid fields, no cometary material. "It's as if the system has been cleaned," Petrov murmured, voicing a common thought. Upon achieving orbit around the third planet, the visual feeds confirmed their worst fears. The surface of Lanthe 3 was covered in a strange iridescent growth that pulsed with slow, rhythmic movements. Where Xrixian records showed cities and forests, there was now only this uniform, alien landscape. "Analysis of the growth pattern confirms it is not native to this world," reported the science officer. "It appears to be a silicon-carbon hybrid organism with properties of both plant and fungal life. And it's worked. The entire planet's surface is a single organism." Concincaid said slowly, "A planet-sized neural network. Is it sentient?" "Unknown, but it's definitely processing information. We're detecting complex electromagnetic patterns throughout the growth layer." Dew, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly emitted a sharp pulse of bioluminescence. "Admiral, the Crystal Dominion is reporting unusual energy readings from Lanthe 7, the outermost planet. Something is powering up there." Before Concincaid could respond, the tactical officer called out, "Multiple objects launching from Lanthe 7, speed and trajectory consistent with spacecraft. Time to intercept 17 minutes. Concincaid ordered calmly, "Battle stations, all vessels in defensive formation. Let's see what we're dealing with before we start shooting." The next 17 minutes passed in tense silence as the unknown craft approached. They were unlike any ships that either humans or Xrixians had ever encountered. Smooth ovoid structures with no visible propulsion systems or external features of any kind. "They're scanning us," reported the sensor officer. "Unusual frequency patterns. Our countermeasures are having limited effect." Dew added, "The Crystal Dominion reports the same. Their sensory deflection is also proving ineffective." Concincaid made a quick decision. "Open a channel. All frequencies. Universal translation matrix at full capacity. Let's try talking before shooting." After several attempts at communication yielded no response, the alien vessels took up position around the Terran Xrixian task force, maintaining a precise formation that effectively surrounded them. The tactical officer said tensely, "Admiral, they've matched our defensive screen frequency. If they power up weapons, they could punch right through." Concincaid finished, Adjust shield modulation, random pattern, continuous change. The sensor officer reported, the alien vessels are powering up something, not weapons, it's more like a transmission device. A moment later, every screen on the Thermopylae bridge displayed the same image, a complex shifting pattern of light and color that seemed to move with mathematical precision. Petrov suggested, some kind of visual language. Du's appendages were waving in agitation. This is similar to ancient Xrixian symbology. I believe they're attempting to communicate, but the complexity is beyond our translation capabilities. Concincaid made a split-second decision. Lieutenant Commander Petrov, have our AI communications array analyze this pattern, full spectrum analysis, priority override on all other functions. It took several tense minutes, but eventually the ship's advanced AI produced a tentative translation. Identify purpose, intentions, the computer rendered in blocky text. Concincaid said, they want to know who we are and why we're here. Simple enough, send this response. We are representatives of the Terran Alliance and the Xrixian Empire. We come to investigate reports of unknown activity in this region. Our intentions are peaceful exploration and contact. The message was converted back into the visual language and transmitted. The response came almost immediately, another complex pattern that the AI struggled to interpret. Categorization, biological, individual, inefficient, it finally rendered. Petrov muttered, I don't like the sound of that. Before anyone could respond, the alien vessels began emitting a powerful energy field that washed over the task force. Ship systems flickered and several crew members cried out in pain as the field penetrated the hull. The science officer shouted over the alarms, some kind of scanning beam. It's probing everything. The ship, our systems, even our bodies. Concincaid ordered, shields to maximum. Tactical, prepare to... She was cut off as the alien vessels suddenly withdrew the energy field and moved back, maintaining their formation but increasing the distance. New patterns flashed across the screens, which the AI translated with increasing confidence. Assessment complete. Biological coalition, hierarchical command, primitive technology, minimal threat, potential resource. Petrov repeated with feeling, I really don't like the sound of that. Concincaid's expression hardened. Ask them about the Lanthe. What happened to the civilization on the third planet? After the question was transmitted, there was a longer pause before the response appeared. Integration, optimization, improvement, ascension, the Lanthe serve. A chill ran through the bridge. The implications were clear. The native species had not been destroyed. They had been converted. Their very biology repurposed to serve some greater function. Do, Concincaid said quietly. I think it's time we left this system. The alien's bioluminescence had dimmed to almost nothing, a sign of extreme distress. Agreed, Admiral. The Council must be informed immediately. Helm, plot a course out of the system, maximum speed. Communication, inform the rest of the task force. We're leaving now. As the human and Xrixian vessels began to maneuver, the alien ships made no move to stop them. Instead, a final message flashed across the screens. Departure permitted. Assessment continues. We will find you again. Not if we can help it, Concincaid muttered as the task force accelerated towards the jump point. Once they were safely in FTL, heading back towards Xrixian space, Concincaid called an emergency briefing with the senior officers and their Xrixian counterparts. What exactly did we just encounter? She asked bluntly. High Commander First Storm, joining via holographic link from the Crystal Dominion, answered, I believe we have rediscovered the Vex. Du's appendages stiffened in shock. Impossible. The quarantine has held for 3 millennia. The Xrixian commander insisted, the patterns match ancient records, and the biotechnological integration is consistent with their methods. Somehow they have escaped containment. Concincaid interrupted, hold on. You told us the Vex were self-replicating machines created by an organic species. What we saw was some kind of biological technology, a merger. First Storm explained grimly, that is why they were so dangerous. The Vex do not merely destroy biological life. They assimilate it, repurpose it. They see organic material as simply another resource to be optimized. Petrov asked incredulously, "And you quarantine them rather than destroying them?" Du said quietly, "We tried destruction. It did not work. The Vex adapt too quickly. Quarantine was our only option. A coalition of 7 species established a network of monitoring stations around the affected sector with orders to destroy any attempt to breach the perimeter." Kincaid said flatly, "Well, either your monitoring stations failed or these aren't the same Vex. Either way, we have a serious problem. Those ships let us go for a reason. They've learned everything they needed to know about us, and now they're calculating their next move." The grim silence that followed was broken by Commander Zhao. "Admiral, based on the tactical data we gathered, I believe we could defeat those specific vessels in direct combat. Their defensive capabilities did not appear particularly advanced." Concincaid replied, "But that's just it. Those weren't warships. They were scout vessels, research platforms. They weren't there to fight. They were there to learn. And now they know exactly what our ships can do, how our crews operate, even our biological makeup." First Storm's holographic image shimmered as the Xrixian commander leaned forward. "Admiral Concincaid is correct. The Vex we faced in the ancient past operated in exactly this manner: observe, analyze, adapt, then strike with overwhelming force precisely calibrated to exploit the weaknesses they had identified." Concincaid said decisively, "Then we need to prepare. Not just our task force, but both our civilizations. If these Vex, or whatever they are, decide we're their next target, we need to be ready." The return journey was tense but uneventful. As they neared Xrixian space, Concincaid spent long hours in her quarters reviewing historical records the Xrixians had shared about their previous encounter with the Vex. The more she read, the more concerned she became. The original Vex conflict had nearly destroyed the Xrixian Empire at the height of its power. Only a desperate alliance with 6 other species, some of whom had been bitter enemies, had managed to contain the threat. And even then, the victory had been Pyrrhic. Entire worlds had been quarantined, millions of citizens abandoned to assimilation when evacuation proved impossible. And now, somehow, the Vex had returned. Or perhaps they had never truly been contained at all. When Du visited her quarters on the final day of the journey, Concincaid didn't bother with diplomatic niceties. She said accusingly, "Your empire knew this was a possibility. That's why you were so quick to form an alliance with us after your initial assessment of our capabilities. You weren't just impressed by our warships. You were looking for potential allies against a threat you knew might return." The alien's bioluminescence pulsed in what might have been embarrassment. "Not exactly, Admiral. We genuinely did not believe the Vex still existed as a threat. The quarantine has been maintained for thousands of years with no incidents." But Concincaid pressed, "But yes, when we encountered your species and witnessed your military capabilities, some on the Council did suggest that a human alliance would be valuable should any similar threat ever emerge. It was a contributing factor in our decision to pursue peaceful relations rather than conquest." Concincaid sighed. "Well, at least you're being honest now. So, what happens next? Does your council have contingency plans for this scenario?" Du admitted, "There are ancient protocols. They will be activated immediately upon our return. All border worlds will be placed on high alert, and the old coalition will be notified, those species that still exist at least, and humanity. The Council will almost certainly propose a formal military alliance now, with full intelligence sharing and joint defense planning." Concincaid nodded slowly. "I believe Earth Central will be receptive to that proposal, given the circumstances. The Vex, if that's what they are, clearly represent a threat to both our civilizations." Du's appendages arranged in a pattern Concincaid had come to recognize as sincere appreciation. "I must confess, Admiral, when our fleet first encountered your species, I believed you to be dangerously militaristic, a civilization so focused on warfare that you had sacrificed beauty and harmony in pursuit of destructive power. And now I understand that your approach to space exploration was shaped by wisdom we lacked. The universe is not always kind to emerging civilizations. Perhaps if the ancient Xrixians had built warships instead of crystalline artwork, the original Vex conflict might have ended differently. Concincaid smiled wryly. And perhaps if humans had focused more on biology and less on weaponry, we might have better options for dealing with a foe that assimilates organic life. Neither of us has all the answers due, but together we might have enough of them to survive. As the task force approached the Xrixian border stations, Concincaid stood on the Thermopylae observation deck, gazing out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was stirring, calculating, preparing, an enemy that didn't conquer civilizations but consumed them, that didn't destroy life but repurposed it. The coming conflict would test both humanity and the Xrixians in ways neither had faced before. But standing there, watching as the crystalline Xrixian ships flew in formation alongside the angular armored hulls of the human vessels, Concincaid felt a flicker of hope. The Xrixians had beauty and biological mastery. Humanity had grit and guns. And maybe, just maybe, that combination would be enough to face whatever was coming. When Commander Petrov joined her at the viewport, she didn't turn away from the stars. She said quietly, "You know, when I joined the Navy, I never expected first contact to involve jellyfish with superiority complexes." Petrov replied with a grim smile. "And I never expected to be facing down techno-organic planet eaters within my first year as your XO. Life's full of surprises." Concincaid agreed. "That it is, Lieutenant Commander, that it is." She turned away from the viewport, straightening her uniform with practiced precision. "Now, let's go prepare to fight a war against an enemy that turns people into fungus. I'm pretty sure they didn't cover that at the academy." As they walked together towards the bridge, Concincaid couldn't help but think about how quickly everything had changed. 3 months ago, the Xrixians had arrived at Earth expecting easy conquest and had instead found a species that had spent its entire history preparing for threats exactly like them. Now, both civilizations faced something far worse, an enemy that neither pretty ships nor powerful guns might be enough to defeat. It would take everything both species had learned, all their respective strengths combined, to face what was coming. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's obsession with building better weapons, the very trait the Xrixians had initially found so primitive and disturbing, might well be the factor that saved both their civilizations from extinction. And in the end, wasn't that the most human story of all? Building the biggest stick, not because you wanted to use it, but because someday, somewhere, something would come that made you desperately glad you had it.